America picks a new president. After a wild campaign in which Donald Trump's attacks on the media and Hillary Clinton's avoidance of the media took center stage, news outlets have turned this final stretch of 2016 into a blizzard of polls, punditry, and pontification, and lots of maps.
To win this election.
But with all the wall-to-wall prognostication, do journalists have a clue who will win on Tuesday? Was it a blunder for much of the press to have written off Trump's chances just 2 weeks ago? Has the FBI probe of Hillary's emails, fueled by lots of leaks, been as big a bombshell as the pundits predicted? And what role has media bias played in this endless election? I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. It's all become a blur for the media as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton make their final sprint to the battleground states across the country, and the rhetoric in this often ugly campaign has turned even harsher.
She will get us into World War III. She will get us into World War III. I will tell you that. She's incompetent. She will get us into World War III. The arrogant political class never learns.
I am sick and tired of the negative, dark, divisive, dangerous vision and behavior of people who support Donald Trump.
Joining us now to analyze the campaign coverage in these chaotic last days, Erin McPike, a political commentator and former reporter for Real Clear Politics. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. And Joe Trippi, Fox News contributor and a Democratic strategist. Erin, a number of pundits came out 2 weeks ago, said this race was over, done. Hillary was going to win. Who's going to be in her cabinet? No way Trump could pull this thing off. Was that, in retrospect, reckless?
It was in a way, because throughout the primary, the media kept saying that Donald Trump couldn't win the primary, and then he kept winning state after state after state and became the nominee. I guess we know that the media will never learn, but maybe, just maybe, this time we know that it's always going to be a race until it's over.
Molly, I'm not saying Donald Trump is going to win, but given that whole history of journalists and pundits writing him off, and also the avalanche of negative stuff in the press against him, he's still in contention. So what does that tell us about the role of the press here?
Again, people should be very humble when they're analyzing how things are going in this race. That humility should have been built in from how often we got things wrong during the primary. At the same time, this change of heart is actually completely legitimate. It did seem like it was unwinnable a few weeks ago. It's still an uphill climb for him, but the change is because he has gained in the polls and because Hillary Clinton has had such a bad couple of weeks. So this is not necessarily a problem. This is just reflecting the reality of the changed race.
I know your middle name is humility, Joe Trippi, but many on your side did think it was a virtual lock for Hillary. But don't veteran commentators know that even without the FBI and this other stuff, that races almost always tighten in the final days, presidential races?
I think a lot of commentators said things like that, or prefaced it with, hey, anything can change.
The more cautious ones did.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, the media was always goes overboard in these things, and never look. They always get closer at the end. They always do, and so.
But why is that? Because you want to appear so smart that you called it the day before someone else, and then you hope if you're wrong, everyone loses the video.
Well, first of all, if you're wrong, no one. Generally, everybody's wrong. When it's going the way it was, when it was going the way it was pre-Comey letter. Where everybody was sure it was going to happen, there's like little danger in doing it. So
and you set up my next question. Looking back, did the media overestimate the impact of James Comey sending that letter to the Hill, opening an inquiry into Hillary Clinton's emails, Anthony Weiner's laptop, and all of that, because it was covered wall to wall as if it was the biggest bombshell of all time?
It was a big bombshell, and we talked about this last weekend. It needed to be covered in a big way
I agree with that
weekend when it broke. But I think the coverage has sort of evened out as we've gone on the last 9 days or so. It deserved to be covered because it was a huge story, and the FBI's involvement in this election is something that the media couldn't possibly ignore.
Well, over the next few days after the weekend that story just kind of took over this campaign, Molly, there was an intense media focus on Comey, the FBI director, and whether he was meddling in the election. A New York Times news story even compared him to J. Edgar Hoover. So that shifted the focus, in my view. What do you think?
It was shameful the way the media covered this. There was no daylight between the Clinton campaign's approach to what happened in the FBI letter and what you were reading in many media outlets. This is a story that should have been covered on the substance. You have an FBI investigation into one of the candidates who is running for president. That is just legitimate on its own. How it affects the race should not be the primary concern of the media covering this race, and it's a big reason why people have such a difficulty trusting their media to cover things.
Are you suggesting that the media followed the Clinton campaign line, or just somehow came to the same conclusions as people in the Clinton campaign?
You can see it just by the way that the media covered things differently. When the FBI let her get away with the mishandling of classified information in July, a lot of Republicans were upset at that. And you saw the media coverage saying that this was so awful that you would question an FBI investigation. All of a sudden, when this changes, they also change. So it's following the Clinton campaign instead of doing real journalism.
You can't take this out of the politics of it. I mean, it's got to get covered, and there were politics. And the other thing that was going on was the Republicans. I mean, both sides for partisan purposes piled on, and the press initially covered what Chavis and some of the other Republicans and Trump were saying, and that immediately politicized
what they said was that there was a reopening of an investigation, which is obviously true, and immediately you had the media changing the headlines on their stories in response to Clinton campaign complaints, and it was the silliest, most ludicrous thing to say that this was not a reopening of an investigation.
Screaming that it's a criminal investigation and that she's going to jail, and that if he was president, he'd jail her. I mean, come on, they're going to cover that.
There is a legitimate question of whether or not the hundreds of thousands of emails that were found on Weiner's laptop could turn out to be incredibly incriminating for Hillary Clinton or nothing. We don't know, and at the time this exploded, the FBI didn't know because they weren't allowed to read the emails. But at the same time, Hillary Clinton and her people started attacking James Comey personally, and Molly's right. That did sort of become the media narrative to some degree. Or would you challenge that?
No, I think what happened was it was politicized. The Republicans, I mean, I'm not...
You're saying both sides politicized.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Both sides politicized it. The Republicans did, and the Democrats. That's what I mean. Once this all starts happening...
The media should not take part in that politicization process. They should just cover things down the middle of the road. And we have a lot of questions that we need answered about the investigation into Hillary Clinton, into the foundation, and instead we're wasting all this time talking about James Comey instead of the actual investigation.
Because there's an election for president going on, and both sides, and one side is trying to use this to further its cause, and the Democrats are going to push against that. If that means questioning why Comey did it and why he did it at that time, they're going to do that. And then the press has to report all this.
Let me get back to the road to 270 electoral votes. Let me put up a frame grab, as we call it, of CNN the other day. Breaking news banner. We got that? There we see. Breaking news. Look at the cover. There we dropped the banner. Clinton dropped below 270 in CNN electoral map. The only breaking news there was that CNN analysts had adjusted a couple of states, and in their count, by their projection, Clinton was no longer a lock for 270. Remember, these are all projections based on analysts. And interesting exchange on MSNBC between anchor Brian Williams and analyst Mark Halperin over the path to 270, which, Williams, it's getting rough out there.
That was surprising. Now, the CNN breaking news banner, I mean, we haven't actually had Election Day yet.
Well, that's right.
That was kind of an interesting, strange chiron. Now, I will say, as you know, to fully disclose my bias, I love playing with the Electoral College map. It's really fun. But put in context, I want to read you a couple of sentences on the front page of the Washington Post this morning. The U.S. presidential election has become an object lesson in everything that ails a country long seen as a beacon of freedom and hope. In the second top story of the Post, it's on the eve of the election, America is afraid. Put in perspective, talking about the electoral map is not quite that bad. You want to take an antidepressant after reading this.
I see. You're suggesting the press has a dim view of this. I wonder how much of that is it's subtly really about Trump. But, Joe, look, as everybody in the press now obsesses on every new tracking poll in states like Arizona and Colorado and North Carolina and Florida and all that, and Donald Trump going to Michigan, and maybe he thinks his campaign does believe they can put that in play, and now even Hillary Clinton going back there and President Obama going there tomorrow. It still seems like a crapshoot.
Well, look, you can't cover this election without the map. I mean, this isn't a national election. I mean, no one cares. Everybody knows how California is going to vote and how Idaho is going to vote. So everything, the campaigns, where they're going, where they're putting ads up,
yes,
everything.
It's all useful information.
It's all about
Having said that, horse race coverage can kind of overwhelm the actual substance of the campaign. This has actually been an interesting campaign with candidates who have different ideas about foreign policy, immigration, economic policy. When you obsess over horse race politics at the expense expense of those issues, it kind of teaches people not to vote on issues so much as to vote strategically.
Well, let me just say that back in 2008, the night before the election, David Gergen, who was a CNN commentator, went on CNN and said, I expect Barack Obama to get at least 332, maybe 339 electoral votes. He went on to get 365 electoral votes. I remember watching that coverage and being surprised that someone would go on TV and say what would happen the next day. Now we do it all the time, so it doesn't shock me at all. But it did back then, but we've changed so much, it's what we do.
Got to get a break. Okay. Hold it for the next segment. Remember to email us, MediaBuzz@foxnews.com. Ask a question or comment about the media. When we come back, Donald Trump calls out an NBC reporter at a rally, and the network pushes back. And later, the coverage of FBI's Clinton email investigation and a related inquiry. Is the press making James Comey the bad guy? Has been much more disciplined on the stump in the last 10 days, but at one rally he couldn't resist calling out NBC's Katie Tur.
There's something happening. They're not reporting it. Katie, you're not reporting it, Katie. But there's something happening, Katie. There's something happening, Katie.
Well, he was relatively mild, but it was a departure from Trump's scripted approach, and he does have a history of calling out Katie Tur as, in his words, a third-rate reporter.
Yeah, there's a social contract in play, and the way we treat each other is part of that contract. The media have done a lot to hurt that social contract. In recent years, destroying the life of a low-level Capitol Hill staffer because she had the audacity to criticize the Obama family, publishing the addresses of gun owners, hounding pizza shop owners because they have the wrong religious views. And UVA, we just saw what happened where they tried to destroy an entire institution of fraternity and administrators. When people break that social contract, you do expect to see people start to boo back. And the sensitivity and defensiveness that we're seeing among media people, when they have done so much to destroy civil discourse and to disparage the views of so many people, I'm not that impressed that we're getting that upset by it.
Aaron, Katie Tur has written about being shouted at by crowds of once having to be escorted out by the Secret Service. But do you think the media are being overly sensitive, as Molly suggests, to when Trump singles out journalists by name and the crowd kind of turns on them?
I don't. I think she's within her rights to talk about how this affects her personally because she is just doing her job, and she's doing a pretty good job at that, a very good job because she's never covered politics before. I think this is a more complex story than that, though, because she is the first reporter from a major news organization to be assigned to Donald Trump, as she was in June of 2015. She's been there from the very beginning, as MSNBC says frequently before her live shots, and I think Donald Trump probably feels that he should get more positive coverage from her, and that's what he expects. But I think she's doing her job pretty well.
Well, Donald Trump feels he should get more positive coverage from a lot of news regarding. Well, many of which he banned from covering his rallies for months and months. Let me get you.
He gives her a lot of access.
I think it's all the press's fault, and Trump's had nothing to do with it. Yeah, I mean when he calls him out like that, I mean he has a right to do that, but then the reporters can push back, particularly when he's literally sicking his crowd on him, which he has a tendency to have done in the past.
Well, just to clarify, when you say sicking his crowd on him, you're not saying that he's suggesting that anything physical.
Oh no.
The media have lower approval ratings than both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and there's so little self-reflection on why that is and what we should be doing to improve our reputation.
Not big on self-reflection, I agree. Let me get to Melania Trump. She gave a speech in Pennsylvania in which she said this about the web: our culture has gotten too mean and too rough, especially to children and teenagers. And the media reaction was sort of along the lines of CNN's Nana Bash. Have you met Donald Trump? Maybe you should talk to your husband about the example he set.
Well, this is a very fair criticism, since the person we know who's has bad behavior on social media more than anybody is Donald Trump. At the same time, it's interesting to see how the media kind of engaged in their own bullying of Melania Trump or making fun of her language skills or whatnot, and also how they have a different standard for her relationship to her spouse or Donald Trump's relationship to his spouse that we do for Hillary Clinton to her spouse. We're supposed to create this huge wall between Bill and Hillary Clinton that we don't see applied to the Trumps. But
obviously, Bill, a former president. Overall, the media have been fair to Melania Trump, who doesn't really seek the spotlight. This is the first speech she's given since the convention.
I think a number of the stories on her have been fair, and I think the campaign knows that, her working illegally in the U.S. I think where she's gotten short shrift is that she hasn't gotten some of the warmer, fuzzier coverage that spouses of candidates often get. You might remember in 2012, Chris Wallace went to Ann and Mitt Romney's home, and she was making pancakes. Melania Trump doesn't really get those stories. The campaign hasn't put her out there in that way, but she's gotten some short shrift there.
She's an asset to the campaign. There was some snarky coverage early on about her life as a model and all of that. But since the Access Hollywood tape and the accusations against Donald Trump, she's mainly stayed away from TV interviews. probably not wanting to have to deal with that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, also, I think the press has been unfair to her. I think she is not a politician. She's never been out there before. This is a very tough thing for a family member to do. And so when she goes out there and, like, they give her a bad speech they wrote, or they have her talking about something, I mean, the press should put more focus on bad staffing and sort of mismanagement.
You can tell that Trippy's been in a lot of campaigns because he has empathy for people who are the civilians, as we call them. Joe Trippi, Molly Hemingway, Aaron McPike, good to see you this Sunday. Ahead, we'll hear from Fox News correspondents who spent months following Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and what that's been like. But up next, CNN conducts an internal investigation of Donna Brazile leaking questions to the Clinton camp, but won't make it public. CNN has cut ties with Donna Brazile for leaking the network's questions to the Clinton campaign. This is an ethical outrage in which no one looks good. Donna, now the acting DNC chair, is a nice person, but she was not straight with me when she vehemently denied leaking any questions before a CNN town hall with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders last March. As we reported after the first WikiLeaks disclosure, Brazile, a CNN contributor at the time, told the Clinton team in an email that she sometimes gets the questions in advance. She said one person would ask about gun control, forwarded some statistics on guns. That's exactly how the question was set up by Roland Martin of TV One, CNN's partner on the town hall. CNN insisted it hadn't given her any questions and pointed the finger at Roland Martin, who has said he doesn't believe he consulted Brazile in advance. CNN's criticism was mostly just aimed at its partner TV One. This week, the other shoe dropped. In another email to Clinton aides, Brazile wrote, "One of the questions directed to HRC tomorrow is from a woman with a rash. Her family has lead poison, and she will ask, what, if anything, will Hillary do as president to help the people of Flint?" And this is how it went down at the Flint Town Hall.
After my family, the city of Flint, and the children in D.C. were poisoned by lead, will you make a personal promise to me right now that as president in your first 100 days in office, you will make it a requirement that all public water systems must remove all lead service lines throughout the entire United States?
Well, I agree completely. I want to go further, though.
Now, after word leaked that CNN President Jeff Zucker had ordered an internal investigation, my sources say the following: that Donna Brazile didn't talk to Leanne Walters, the woman you just saw, but another Flint woman who also had a rash and had hoped to ask a question. This while Brazile and other CNN folks were handing out bottled water in Flint. That Zucker fired Brazile nearly 3 weeks ago, even though this was announced as accepting her resignation. But remember, made no public announcement until the latest WikiLeaks embarrassment. And finally, that the probe found no one at CNN did anything wrong. Here's the problem. Zucker hasn't addressed this publicly, even though word leaked to the Huffington Post that he told his staff on a conference call that Brazile's actions were disgusting. CNN has limited itself to a terse statement saying it was uncomfortable with what Brazile did. Now, Zucker's a media-savvy guy. He should know that just leaking word of an internal probe won't convince anyone. Imagine CNN's reaction if a presidential candidate did that. Part of the problem was keeping Brazile on the payroll while she was the DNC's vice chair. All the networks employ Democratic and Republican strategists who spin for their candidates. But it's something else to engage in outright cheating, and CNN needs to address the stain that Donna Brazile left on its reputation. Ahead on Media Buzz, Trish Regan explores whether media bias has twisted the coverage of this campaign. But first, John Roberts and Jennifer Griffin with a behind-the-scenes look at following Trump and Clinton. Time now to talk to two correspondents who've been out there covering the presidential nominees for a long time. John Roberts has been traveling with the Trump campaign, and he joins us now from Sioux City, Iowa. John, is it harder to cover a tiny campaign team where, unlike in a traditional campaign, you don't have top press people going out to dinner with reporters and that sort of thing?
Well, I think, Howie, for us, the most difficult part of this is that we haven't been able to ride a campaign plane as we have in so many other campaigns in the past, whether it was Romney or whether it was Bush in 2004 or Gore in 2000. We're flying commercial between the stops. We're almost kind of leaping ahead here, and he's not taking press on the plane with him. So you miss those intimate moments where the candidate comes back to the back of the plane and talks to the press, and you interact with people from the campaign on a regular basis. Clearly, we see people from the campaign from time to time, but it's not that same sense of intimacy that I've experienced in previous campaigns, which makes it a little bit more difficult. You spend more time on the phone making sure you keep up the contacts.
Yeah, not to mention the challenge of getting to all these places by commercial flights. Has Donald Trump ever gotten upset with something you've reported and you've been maybe frozen out for a few days?
You know, not this campaign cycle. I remember in 2012 when I was interviewing him in Las Vegas when he was about to endorse Mitt Romney. I said something to the fact that the endorsement will happen at his hotel, which doesn't have a casino and isn't on the Las Vegas Strip. When I met him to interview him later that day, he said, "You said something not nice about me." And I said, "Hey, I thought you were a big enough guy that you had a thick enough skin that I could, talk about what the real situation is. You don't have a casino. You're not on the Strip." Well, I didn't like it very much. But the funny thing with Trump is that if you're a little critical of him, he tries to win you over. Whereas if you're very fair and balanced with him all the time and don't say anything particularly critical of him, he kind of ignores you. So if you want to get his attention, say something about him that he doesn't like.
And then you'll get courted. Now, you've been on the trail with all these rallies where he often rails against the disgustingly dishonest press, calling journalists scum, calling some of your colleagues out by name. Is that disturbing to watch?
To some degree, clearly with Fox News, almost everybody who comes to these rallies appreciates the fact that we try to be fair and balanced in our coverage. We had a couple of people yesterday who didn't like us a whole lot, but by and large, these are Fox News viewers who come to these events. But to see the way that he plays off the media and uses the media as a foil, to some degree can get disturbing when the crowd turns on the media. I mean, the other day in Miami, I saw him calling out one of my colleagues, and he was winking at her as he was doing it. So he's just playing a game, but I think sometimes people in the audience take it a little bit more seriously. People are flipping off the media. They're yelling at them. You might hear somebody say, "Tell the truth," which is fine, but when they start to get a little nasty and almost, I want to say, borderline mean, it does get a little disturbing because you wonder what might happen. I remember one event, and don't ask me what city it was in, Howie, whereas the press came in off the charter, they were booed by 15,000 people in the audience. And, I mean, that goes to show the fact that what he has said about the media over the course of these weeks really is having an effect.
Yeah, media not too popular these days, especially among Trump supporters. So I was wondering how it felt to be experienced it week after week. John Roberts, great to see you. Tough campaign for you.
Good to talk to you, Howie. Thanks.
A lot of frequent flyer miles. Meanwhile, Chelsea Clinton and Joe Biden are on the campaign trail right about now. They're about to speak at events in Chester and Scranton, Pennsylvania, a key battleground state where the polls have really tightened. Now, I spoke earlier with Jennifer Griffin, who covers the Clinton campaign from Cleveland. Jennifer Griffin, welcome.
Hi, Howie.
For months, you covered Hillary Clinton during that period when you had very little access to the candidate. She wasn't holding news conferences. How did that feel in terms of you trying to cover her?
Well, it doesn't feel that much different from today. We don't have much access to her today, even though we're on the plane with her. We haven't seen her on the plane. She's not come back to talk to us since the FBI email story broke. So it feels very much like when we started over the summer when she was in a very tough race against Bernie Sanders before the convention, before she crossed the finish line and got the nomination. We're kind of back to the future with that one.
Right, so that brief period of availability is now history. Now, you told People magazine that the WikiLeaks emails have really shown that there is a disdain in the Clinton camp to the press. Have you felt that personally?
Well, I can't say personally, and I don't think it's any different towards me or Fox News as to the rest of the press. I think what you're dealing with is a candidate who has been in the public eye for 30 years. They've been in the White House before. She's been Secretary of State before. And she, ever since the email controversy started, shortly after she launched her election, she has been in kind of a bunker mode, and her campaign has been in bunker mode. And so it's really just the way that they treat all of the press, and I think it's going to be a very different White House if she wins in terms of very difficult to cover. In fact, I mean, I would compare the way it's been even with her aides in the last week since the FBI director's announcement. It used to be at least they would come back, her spokesman would come back and talk to us. Now they just sort of dip their big toe in and then retreat like a turtle, or they'll come back and everything's off the record. I mean, it's very difficult to get on the record statements.
Right, so it's a bit of a stonewall, it sounds like, in these final days. Now, do you think this whole attitude is related to the scars of the last 25 years and as they see it, media's treatment of Hillary Clinton going back to the days when she was First Lady?
Absolutely. I've even heard some of her aides say, even when she thinks she's sitting down with people she's known a long time, people she might consider friendly press, she always feels like she gets a gotcha question, or somebody goes back to something that she doesn't really want to talk about. And so, but what's surprising to me is Hillary Clinton has been around a long time, and as you've seen her on the debate stage, she can answer any question. There's no question that we, the press, can throw at her that's really going to stump her. So I do find this reticence to talk to us somewhat surprising, given the fact that she can handle herself for 90 minutes on a stage with tough questions in a debate format.
Yeah, she's perfectly capable of handling journalists, but she just doesn't like to do it if she can avoid it. Jennifer Griffin, great to see you.
Thank you.
And coming up, has the press been as unfair to Donald Trump as he says? Trish Regan will be here on that. And later, Ed Henry on the coverage of the FBI and the Clinton campaign. Hillary Clinton's campaign. And joining us now from New York is Trish Regan, host of the Intel Report, which airs weekdays at 2 Eastern on Fox Business. So Trish, I'm going to hold up cover of New York Magazine, Trump, loser, big close-up of his face, and the front page of the New York Times here, glowing picture of Hillary Clinton with Beyonce and Jay-Z. Thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, don't get me started on Jay-Z, because you want to talk about someone who is demeaning to women. That is Jay-Z. If you go and look at any of those lyrics, and we did this week on the Intel Report, and, you know, look, I can't even repeat them. I wouldn't even dare repeat them on the air. They are so horrible. And he's a misogynist in terms of what he's saying there, and it's horrible to think that he has had such a successful career promoting this kind of hostility to women. And then the idea that Hillary Clinton's touting him as someone, you know, who is one of her big supporters. I mean, to me, there's a double standard there in that, you know, this is a guy who writes horrifically about women, using many, many demeaning words. Of course, everybody's concerned about Donald Trump's words, and granted, he is the one running for president, but to stand up there with the likes of Jay-Z and say that you're for women, I don't get it.
Now, Trump, of course, has complained, and I've talked about a lot of the coverage of him being imbalanced in the sense that he gets a lot of media scrutiny, far less for Hillary Clinton. And some of it's, you know, absolutely legitimate. Trump Foundation, his business record, charitable contributions, the statements. But has there been, in your view, any comparable, or I should say, not that Clinton hasn't been covered, but a comparable level of scrutiny of the Democratic nominee?
Well, I think that the media is incentivized to go after him much harder than they're going after her. I mean, we've seen evidence of this. For example, even in the WikiLeaks documents that have been released, that there is a cozy relationship, if you would, between many members of the media and the Clinton campaign. And so they, for whatever reason, and perhaps it's because of their own political bias, they are out to get Donald Trump in a way that they just aren't for Hillary Clinton. And so, yes, we're covering the WikiLeaks releases. We're covering the concerns about pay-to-play, whether or not that exists, but they certainly have come forward with a lot of evidence that suggests there's some impropriety there. We're covering that, but most of the media is reluctant to do so, Howie. They would much rather go after Donald Trump.
Well, I think that people get that. There's a USA Today poll by nearly 10 to 1. People surveyed think that the media want Hillary Clinton to win, and that's also true of 3/4 of Clinton supporters. But let me ask you about something that jumped out at me. New York Times liberal columnist Charles Blow writing about Donald Trump and saying, "With my last breath, America, are you blanking kidding? I cannot wrap my head around how others with level heads and sound minds can even consider Trump for president of this country." And to me, that's insulting to the people who, millions of people who support Donald Trump, when somebody says, oh, I can't even see how anybody could even consider the guy.
Well, you know, Charles is living in a bubble where he just doesn't get out much, I guess, because if you go anywhere in this country outside of some of the big metropolitan areas, what you see is that people are really hurting. They're hurting
economically. They have lost their jobs. They have lost their jobs to places like China and Mexico. And so that is why this message is resonating. They don't like big political establishment types telling them what they should do. And frankly, this is a problem that political parties have had on both sides, right? I mean, you think about Mitt Romney and what he represented and how out of touch he was with the middle class in America. You now look at Hillary Clinton, she's out of touch. Suddenly you got a billionaire who's worth more than any of them, and he seems to be relating more to the middle class in a way that, regardless of what happens, the Conservative Party and the liberals as well, they need to embrace that more because people are feeling it.
Let me just break it. I've got just a few seconds. Do you think it is fair to say that much of the mainstream media are out of touch with or insufficiently sensitive to the concerns of these millions of people, many of them working class, who think the system is broken?
Yeah, of course, because mainstream media, I mean, you know, people are highly educated. They're living in affluent areas. They have no idea what it's like to be living on a paycheck-to-paycheck basis, and you're worried about your factory shutting down because of the competition coming from overseas. You go to any little small town in upstate New York, and you see how devastated they are, Howie, and they're just, you know, just a fraction of what they once were. That's the feeling out there in the country, and the media doesn't get it.
Trish Regan, thanks so much. Good to see you. And meanwhile, both candidates not doing TV interviews anymore as a matter of strategy. Hillary Clinton hasn't done a national TV interview since September 12th. After the break, a look at the leaks and counter-leaks at FBI and Justice over the Hillary Clinton investigations. Ed Henry is on deck.
We're big enough to win, small enough to care.
In these final days of the 2016 campaign, the media have been awash in leaks about James Comey launching new FBI inquiries into Hillary Clinton. Joining us now to look at the coverage, Ed Henry, Fox's chief national correspondent. So, Bret Baier and Fox reported, based on sources, that a separate FBI probe of the Clinton Foundation has been going on for more than a year, is very high priority, many interviews being aggressively pursued. NBC's Pete Williams says few want to call it an investigation. That's a term of art at the FBI. There was an initial inquiry opened a couple of months ago based largely on media reports and the book Clinton Cash. So is this becoming a battle of leaks?
It is a battle of leaks, and we can get to the substance of the allegations in a minute. But first, yeah, I spoke to a senior FBI source who said Brett and others were right that there was this big meeting at the beginning of this year, FBI and the Obama Justice Department, where some of these FBI agents presented some serious allegations against the Clinton Foundation, wrongdoing, financial issues, and they got pushback, not just from the Obama Justice Department. Some people assume, well, that's just politics. They don't want it to come out in an election year. But I'm told some of the FBI superiors as well said, wait a second, it's not quite there. And by the way, that's not that unusual. This happens with FBI investigations on any number of issues. Agents present evidence, they present facts, they present hearsay, they present everything, and then people above them have to make decisions. By the way, Howie, that's what we do in newsrooms as well. You say, I want that story on the front page tomorrow.
And I'm your editor, and I say, Ed, you haven't got it. Go back and do some more reporting. That's not unusual in criminal investigation. What is unusual is the way in which this is all leaked out, because this stuff is usually so closely held. I want to come back to that, but let me mention that Bret Baier clarified his report on Friday, saying his sources are now not certain that Hillary Clinton's server, the personal server, was hacked by, foreign intelligence agents. And he addressed a subsequent interview after his report in which he had said, yes, was asked about whether the investigations would continue after the election. He said, yes, our sources said it would, that they would continue to, likely an indictment. That was a mistake, Bret Baier said, that he was sorry. He should have said they'll continue to build their case, and that was the right thing to do to clarify. But on this question of it's all playing out in public, I mean, the Wall Street Journal was the first to get at this, Ed, saying that FBI agents were pursuing this, were kind of hot on this story. But senior Justice Department and FBI officials didn't think they had much evidence. And they asked the agents to stand down, but some of them kept going. So it sounds like somewhere between an important investigation that is being poo-pooed or some rogue agents that don't want to give up.
Here's what I took away from the reporting of the Wall Street Journal and Brett, and to focus on what Brett got right, which is that there's not just one investigation, there's a second track here. Everyone assumed, look, this was just an investigation of classified information. And by the way, let's not forget, Hillary Clinton lied about that in March of 2015. She said there's no classified information on the server. Proven again and again that's not true. She wasn't indicted over that, but she told a lie. Second track now that Brett was reporting on is that the FBI has been looking at the Clinton Foundation. And as I've been investigating this whole WikiLeaks situation over the last couple of weeks, Is there a quid pro quo? We're not sure, but there's an awful lot of quid here. $12 million that we first broke on Brett's show from the King of Morocco going into the Clinton Foundation. Do you think they didn't want anything out of the Clinton State Department? Do you think they won't seek favors from a potential President Clinton?
For $12 million?
$12 million. That's kind of a lot of money. And so this is fruitful stuff to investigate. And by the way, Anthony Weiner's laptop, which goes back to the first track on was there classified information or not. Secondly, Huma Abedin was being paid by the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. So that laptop, by the way, Howie, might have information that these FBI agents Brett was talking about might be kind of interested in terms of whether, I'm not saying there was there a nexus there with these donors giving millions to the foundation who might have got something from the Clinton State Department?
Right.
That's a big question.
Right. I mean, the lead of Brett Baer's story was that there was an FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation, and Fox stands by that.
Absolutely.
There is now this debate about, well, is it an investigation? Is it an inquiry? How far has it gotten? And Rudy Giuliani took some heat because he indicated in one Fox interview that he knew about the Comey letter. This is on the other investigation, one that's been publicly acknowledged on the emails in advance. And then he kind of backtracked to say, well, he'd only talked to former FBI agents who obviously may be a conduit to current FBI agents. I used to cover the Justice Department. This is extraordinarily hard stuff to get. And as a reporter, you always like getting the inside scoop. But at the same time, law enforcement people are not supposed to be talking to reporters about ongoing criminal probes.
And so why are these leaks coming? Is there politics involved? I mean, look, Rudy Giuliani shouldn't have gotten a heads up on that.
I mean,
if he did, I don't really know.
Trump supporter.
But at the end of the day, that's a distraction and doesn't get to the main point of what Brett's getting at and what the Wall Street Journal was getting at, which is that let's follow the facts. And that's something for Hillary Clinton. The major point of all of this that's come out in the last few days is that the FBI probe of Hillary Clinton is not over. Win or lose, she's going to have big questions coming, especially if she wins. She's going to be dealing with James Comey as her FBI director. This is somebody who was nominated by President Clinton. As you know, they have 10-year terms.
Yeah.
So whether it's Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, James Comey's still there. This is not going away.
Right. I mean, we're not going to find out much more before Tuesday and Election Day, but this is not going away. Seems a safe assumption to make. Ed Henry, great
That's
to see
what
you.
I'm sticking to, the facts.
Thanks very much, Ed. Still to come, a devastating legal loss for Rolling Stone magazine and some final thoughts on the coverage of this campaign. Look at this. ABC national reporter Lindsay Davis doing a live shot in South Carolina where a sex offender had allegedly held a woman captive, but that yellow police tape behind her is phony. Put up by her crew. That's right. ABC faked a crime scene, as noted by CNN. ABC calls this completely unacceptable and pulled the producer from the field. But doesn't the correspondent also have some responsibility for this troubling trickery? Rolling Stone lost a major libel suit on Friday over that utterly botched and utterly false story about a supposed gang rape at the University of Virginia. A jury held Sabrina Erdely, she's the reporter in the case, liable in the $7.5 million suit brought by UVA Administrator Nicole Aramo, and also found the magazine defamed her with actual malice. The trial showed that many red flags took place, that Rolling Stone simply ignored these in not fully checking the claims of the accuser named Jackie. Publisher Jan Wenny apologized to Aramo, but Wenner was way too late. Now, this wild, crazy, intense, utterly absorbing campaign finally comes to an end on Tuesday. I hear some of you cheering. But I have to say, the media have never had a worse campaign. The constant focus on sensationalism and insults, and the candidates bear some responsibility here, drove the race into the tabloid gutter. And then there was the misjudgments and sometimes outright hostility toward Donald Trump, and the far lower level of scrutiny visited on Hillary Clinton, and the repeated attempts to declare the race over and coronate the former First Lady. No matter who wins, the press needs to do some self-examination here, even as we gear up to cover the new president-elect. Well, that's it for this edition of Media Buzz. I'm Howard Kurtz. Thanks for joining us. We hope you will like our Facebook page. Check it out. We post a lot of original content there, including your buzz, my video responses to your questions. You can send them in by email, mediabuzz@foxnews.com. Stick to the media. Mediabuzz@foxnews.com. Let's consider the conversation on Twitter. And, you know, it's fascinating. Everybody here wants to know what's going to happen. And we have this great national melodrama where we really don't know. Heading up to New York tomorrow, I'll see you from this fancy new Fox studio in Manhattan on election night. Everybody's very jealous of that studio, including me. And we are back here next Sunday. We hope you'll join us then with the latest buzz. Latest first post-election edition, where we look back at the campaign and the coverage of the new administration. We're live all day here, a special edition of Outnumbered.